I still remember the color of the wall behind Dr. Benninger's head as I sat before the review committee. A grooved, yellowed ivory that the university had probably called cream on procurement orders, but with years of fingerprints and scuffs, looked more like something once white and now resigned to an offbeat ugliness. 3 professors glared at printouts before them. I could hardly make out the text from where I sat, but I knew every section by heart. My proposal for a documentary on the disappearing histories of Berlin's Turkish guest workers, told through the eyes and kitchens of 3 matriarchs in Kreuzberg. I'd spent months shooting test footage, tracking down families, sitting in steam-filled backrooms listening to stories over tart black tea. This was the last hurdle before funding, approval from the committee. Benninger, clinical in horn-rimmed glasses, finally cleared his throat. "We see some technical ambition in your submission," he began, pausing to readjust his glasses, "but it's unclear how this narrative approach offers any significant academic value. We find it lacks objectivity." His eyes met mine for a moment, distant as a frostbitten pond. "Anecdotes do not constitute research." Dr. Freytag, whose only visible specialism seemed to be cultivated boredom, added, "And you have few academic references. Personal stories are, I'm sorry, but the committee finds this approach sentimental and quite limited. There is no reliable precedent for assessing such subjective material." They spoke a language I'd rehearsed but could never quite master. Institutional disapproval, crisp as pressed shirts and as dry as dust. I realized slowly that they had no interest in what my film revealed, the laughter, the pain, the thick knot of nostalgia in those kitchens. Only that it did not fit their rubric. The decision, I knew even before Dr. Benninger folded his hands, would be no. I stared at my lap while their verdict came, gentle, like someone folding a note of pity, but unmistakably final. No approval, no funding, no university credit. My voice stayed lodged in my throat. I walked out with my backpack slung too heavy on one shoulder, past the Erasmus students clustered around vending machines and the sharp blue February sky outside. At that moment grief drew a hard, cold outline around me, clarifying everything. There would be no shortcut, no rescue. When I stepped through the doors of my parents' flat in Tempelhof, overheated, cluttered, perfumed faintly with linoleum and stewed peaches, my mother hovered at the stove, ladling soup. My father stood at the kitchen table with crossword puzzle half completed and glasses perched on his nose. I told them quietly about the rejection. My mother set down the ladle. "But why not?" she began. "They said it was too personal, not academic enough." My father only grunted. "You always look for the difficult way. You should have chosen economics or engineering. There's work in that." Later, when word floated to relatives, old aunts, cousins who wore silk scarves to every family dinner, Uncle Matthews with his stubborn, critical gaze, it twisted into something almost comic. "A film about grandmothers making dinner, that's your plan." Cousin Birgit's laugh was sharp and unforgiving, eyes flickering with unspoken judgment. "Why not just record us next time we have coffee, HM?" The next months passed in a slurry of temp jobs. Pouring coffee in cafes, conducting market research phone calls, taking notes in legal offices. Even while answering lines, "Vielen Dank für Ihren Anruf, why kann ich Ihnen helfen?" I scribbled plans for scenes or saved tiny sums for camera rental. But the cold truth was that no official body wanted this film. Not the university, not the city grants office, where a young bureaucrat had shrugged apologetically and handed back my application with "too niche" penciled in the margin. Not my family, who carried on as if I was suffering a childish delusion. I spent long evenings in my tiny New Köln apartment listening to Turkish radio and watching the footage I'd already taken, fingers numb from cracked windowpanes. Sometimes, when it seemed particularly foolish, this devotion to a project that seemed to draw only skepticism, I rehearsed what I'd say if someone asked why I hadn't moved on. Because I owed something to the women who'd let me into their homes, who'd shown me their battered photo albums and handed me recipes scribbled in Turkish and German, trusting that I would listen carefully and remember them. Their stories had explained this city to me in a way nothing else had. Letting them disappear felt like a quiet, cruel betrayal. I kept shooting, squeezing hours out of weekends, trading translation services for footage edits, selling my old bicycle to pay for an external mic. The project grew unwieldy. Sometimes in the low, uncertain light of 2 a.m. it felt doomed. My grandmother's friend Nesrin, one of my subjects, grew sick, then died. I filmed her daughter folding her veils, her kitchen silent for the first time since I'd known her. I cried that night and considered deleting everything, but grief, as it settled, brought a kind of clarity. Losing Nesrin made every half-finished story feel lonelier, more urgent. If I didn't finish, no one would. 2 years crawled by. By then, I'd pieced together enough material for a short demo, 15 minutes of mothers stirring rice, speaking with pride and sorrow about the husbands who worked double shifts, the Berlin apartments that never felt like home. I sent the clip on a lark to an arts collective in Kreuzberg, the kind that held noisy screenings in converted basements. 3 days later, I heard back, "We'd love to premiere the film. Can you expand it for a full feature?" That first screening happened in October. The room was so dark I couldn't see my own palms. The audience, mostly young, restless, full of opinions, watched. Some wept openly at a scene where Fatma, the oldest matriarch, read her daughter's letter home from the 1980s. Afterward, they applauded, not with forced politeness, but with real, spontaneous warmth. A thin young woman in a corduroy jacket told me, tears streaked down her face, "My grandmother came here the same year. I never asked her about it. Thank you." Rumors spread. A student journalist wrote a 3-page article. The Berlinisch Zeitung picked it up. A Turkish radio station called me for an interview. Then a French documentary festival sent an invitation with a reimbursement for travel. I sent frantic emails for subtitles, stayed up all night editing. Outside the festival, Paris drummed with rain and yellow streetlights. When they played my film to a packed black box theater, I held my knees rigid so I wouldn't quake apart. After the lights came up, the festival director gave me the Critics' Choice Award. I walked out dazed, grasping the cold, heavy plaque like a piece stolen from another life. More screenings followed. Vienna, Stockholm, then Istanbul, where Fatma's granddaughter came weeping to shake my hand. Suddenly articles trickled in, then faster, an intimate portrait of Berlin's forgotten storytellers. I met a gentle producer who offered a modest contract for my next documentary. For the first time, I paid my rent from film money. Recognition, once a distant fantasy, arrived with a strange, grinding slowness. I learned to field praise with nervous gratitude, as if expecting someone to reach across the applause and say, "We've made a mistake." Months passed. I called home less. Our conversations looped through routines. "Are you eating? Do you have enough socks? Will you come at Christmas?" Rarely about my work, except for an occasional skeptical aside from my father. "Still making those little films?" I missed Berlin fiercely, the busy streets around Cottbusser Tor, the sour tang of Späti beer, the way the evening light cut through ancient sycamores. I longed for home, but the memory of mockery from family, the stunted pride, made return feel complicated. Part of me wanted to crow about my newfound success, another part feared only further diminishment. It was the festival at the Kino International, the domed post-war cinema along Karl Marx Allee, that broke my hesitation. The Berlin Film Week invited my documentary as its centerpiece, with a Q&A panel and local press coverage promised. I opened the email twice and read every line again just in case. The morning of the screening, I stood in my parents' kitchen, the air seasoned with coffee and soap. My father scowled at the newspaper while my mother, at the sink, hummed tunelessly. I cleared my throat. "My film's premiering tonight at Kino International. Press is coming." I tried to keep my voice steady. "It's, sort of a big thing." My father's brow arched, a careful barricade of skepticism. "Is your name on the posters?" "Yes," I answered, rubbing my knuckles, "on the posters and the program." My mother's hands paused over the mug she was drying. "Should we come?" she asked, uncertainty coiled in her voice. A sharp, defensive part of me wanted to refuse. If they hadn't believed then, why let them see now? But another, quieter voice urged patience. "Yes, if you want." Word, it turned out, traveled faster than I imagined. By afternoon, Cousin Birgit messaged, asking if the family could see what all the fuss was about. Uncle Matthews would come if he wasn't too busy. Even my old literature teacher from gymnasium bought a ticket. That evening, the whole city glowed in cold blue. Posters for my film hung framed in the cinema lobby, my name below the title in firm black letters. The crowd pressing in wore all the faces I'd once known. Skeptical aunts in silk, tired mothers from the neighborhood, aging men in battered cashmere, and others, strangers, camera crews, local journalists with hungry eyes. In the hush before the show, as lights descended, my heart knocked hard in my ribs. My parents sat 2 rows behind me. I barely turned, afraid of searching for approval too quickly. On screen, my film opened as always, with a trembling shot of Fatma flattening dough, hands sure and weathered, her voice soft as knitted wool. In Turkey, I was always my father's daughter, and here I became the mother of my street. Scenes unfolded, steaming pots, Arabic singing leaking through the walls, children reciting poetry in cramped hallways, the fragile warmth of exile and laughter. I watched the audience, not the screen, watching for shifting postures, the soft pang of recognition, someone's head lowering to hide a sudden tear. When the credits rolled, applause began, polite at first, then growing, layers of palms striking in uneven but sincere gratitude. For a moment I sat, stunned, then the moderator called me forward, the heavy house lights strung my eyes. On stage I stumbled through my answers, hands trembling as I spoke. Then a voice cut through. "I'm her father," my father called, voice quivering with awkward pride, "and I am happy to see her name up there." People turned, smiling, my mother dabbed her eyes, tears gathering fast. Afterward in the echoing lobby, my relatives gathered awkwardly. Uncle Matthews finally said, "You know, I thought this was all nonsense, but it's beautiful, it made me remember stories I forgot." Birgit, suddenly unsure, hugged me, whispering, "I'm sorry for laughing before. You made something real." One by one, the women I'd filmed and their children and neighbors pressed my hand, overwhelming me with shy gratitude. Fatma kissed both my cheeks. "You did what you promised. You remembered us." My parents trailed me through the crowd. At last my father placed a careful hand on my shoulder. "You proved us all wrong." I walked home that night through wide, wet streets, the glow of the Fernsehturm flickering above Berlin like a silver watchful eye. The cold bit my face, but my chest felt light. I passed shops shuttered for the night, the warmth from somewhere in my memory growing clearer. I heard, faintly, laughter and Turkish music from an open window. My film's poster flapped on a bus stop, world premiere. For years I'd carried the wound of being doubted, mocked, treated as oddity or fool. I'd built my work from that ache but finished it with something gentler, gratitude perhaps that the people who loved me even in their skepticism were finally able to witness what persistence and a little faith, even in one strange, rejected dream, could yield. When I returned to my parents' flat, the hall smelled as always of stewed peaches and wood polish. My mother gathered me in her arms wordlessly, tears furrowing her cheek. My father, silent after years of jibes, held me with a rare and final tenderness. I'd left rejected, half ashamed. I had come home forgiven and entire. In the stillness of that narrow living room, in the tapestry of familiar objects, I understood. The dream had not only survived the world's rejection but transformed it, and in doing so it brought me home, not to applause but to belonging, as soft and real as bread on the table, as deep as memory.